finally, what we all have been waiting for and calling for and questioning why it wasn't happening. Stephanie White has stepped up to the plate in defense of Caitlin Clark. I could not believe my ears, guys. I could not believe my ears when I heard this. Stephanie White actually being bold enough to stand on business and protect Caitlin Clark. Stephanie White
just said the very thing everyone else in the WNBA has lacked the courage to say. She spoke candidly about how Caitlin Clark's name is constantly used in every CBA discussion, despite Caitlin never contributing a word. And White? She offered no pleasantries. Let's analyze her statements and why they're causing such a stir. Do you believe Caitlin Clark is being used unfairly by the WNBA and its roster of players? All right, so Stephanie White, the head coach for the Indiana Fever, has given an interview that is creating a major stir across the WNBA. She did something more damaging to the league. She spoke with a calm demeanor and simply stated the facts. Her words were, "I hate it all for Caitlin. She's a 23-year-old kid who loves to play this game and she's a pawn in a lot of other people's games." That line by itself set the entire mood, because she has a point. Caitlin Clark has become the focal point of every debate in the WNBA. From player salaries and TV ratings to media bias and even officiating, her name always finds its way into the conversation.
And it is Stephanie White talking about Caitlin Clark being brought up in a lot of these conversations in CBA by other people and not her speaking herself. And I think this is a really interesting one. And it's clear from this answer, I've already listened to this, it's very clear from this answer that Stephanie White clearly and Caitlin Clark, there's clearly a level of person, like they clearly really like each other as people.
The remarkable thing, Caitlin herself has offered almost no controversial statements this season, yet she's been dragged into every conflict as if she is the source of every problem in the league, and Stephanie White has had her fill. When she calls Caitlin a pawn, she's implicating everyone, the players, the commissioner, and the media. Each side is leveraging Caitlin to advance its own agenda. Let's be direct here. At this moment, Caitlin Clark is the most significant figure women's basketball has ever produced. She's the ratings driver, the ticket seller, and the headline generator. When someone attracts that level of attention, it's natural for others to try and attach themselves, but the situation has reached an absurd level. Each time a player voices criticism of the league, Caitlin's name is brought in. Each time the WNBA announces a new policy, it's analyzed through the lens of how it affects Caitlin. It's as if she's ceased to be a person and has become a marketing asset. That is exactly what Stephanie White is fed up with seeing.
stepping up to the plate, saying what it is. These people are using Caitlin Clark. They're disrespecting, and we can't allow it.
She has watched Caitlin throughout the season, enduring physical abuse on the court and verbal attacks off it, handling everything without ever losing her composure. But let's be clear, no one should be expected to shoulder the burden of an entire league's political landscape at the age of 20. When White uses the word pawn, she's being literal. The WNBA leverages Caitlin to sell seats. The players leverage her to negotiate better contracts. The media leverages her for engagement. And the fans, they are left watching a league that seems more invested in drama than in the actual game of basketball. Now, this is where the conversation takes a compelling turn. White is not merely speaking as a coach defending one of her own. She's speaking as someone who has been there since the league's inception. She was present when the WNBA was fighting for basics, like comprehensive healthcare and year-round pay. So when she refers to this as a growing pain, she's speaking from a place of experience. Back then, players were simply grateful to have a league. Now they demand what they have earned: better pay, greater control, and more respect. But the leadership? They are still lagging far behind. White stated it plainly. Leadership needs to reflect where we are as a league. Translation: the people in charge are trapped in a bygone era. She didn't use Kathy Engelbert's name, but it wasn't necessary. Everyone understood who she was referring to, because at this juncture, every controversy leads back to the commissioner.
And then Caitlin Clark kind of getting brought into that, Caitlin Clark responding to it. What has been your overall assessment of that dialogue and as it relates to your star player?
Yeah, I mean, I hate it all for Caitlin. I feel like, she's a 23-year-old kid who loves to play this game, who is a pawn in a lot of other people's games and a lot of other people's narratives, and I hate that for her. we're coming into a time in the WNBA where we're kind of part of the growing pains of becoming quote unquote mainstream professional sport is some of this stuff.
Let's face facts. Engelbert has been under immense pressure for months. From her dismissal of player concerns, her insensitive remarks about Caitlyn's off-court earnings, she succeeded in alienating both fans and players. So when White says we need better leadership, it is the most courteous version of clean up your act that you're likely to hear. And honestly, she's right. How many times have we seen the league mishandle something straightforward? From inconsistent officiating to failures in communication and fines that make no sense. It feels like those running the show are incapable of managing their own success. Because yes, the WNBA is expanding, but that expansion is driven by the players, not by the people in the front office. Stephanie White even noted your employees are your #1 asset. And she is correct. The players are the foundation of the league, and yet they are the ones who consistently feel disrespected.
You know, I do think that we are at a pivotal moment in terms of the league's history. And look, I was a part of the very first collective bargaining agreement of the WNBA, where we wanted insurance all year long, to now where it is growing and players do deserve more. And leadership needs to reflect where we are as a league and also understand where we are as a league and where players' perspectives are coming from. And, you know, we have coaches on the sidelines and Becky Hammond and myself, and of course Noelle Quinn, who was in Seattle, who played in this league.
Let's rewind briefly. A few weeks ago, Nafisa Collier unleashed on Cathy Engelbert, accusing her of poor leadership and even stating that Cathy claimed Caitlyn should be grateful for the platform. That story was huge. Instead of addressing it directly, Cathy released the most mechanical, soulless statement imaginable. Following that, Sophie Cunningham flat-out called Cathy the most delusional leader our league has ever seen. Lexi Hull echoed Collier's sentiment. Becky Hammond made pointed remarks about officiating. And now Stephanie White, the calm and rational one, is also speaking out. If that fails to convey how deeply this frustration runs, nothing will. But let's return to Caitlyn. She has been remarkably quiet about all of this. When reporters asked her about Collier's statements, her only reply was, "I have great respect for Phi." She made a lot of valid points. That was it. She remained neutral. She did not escalate the situation. Nevertheless, her name dominated headlines for weeks, because people cannot stop connecting her to every single issue. White detests this. You can hear it in her voice. She feels a duty to protect Caitlyn, not just as her player, but as a person. She knows the pressure that comes with being the face of the league. Because here's the reality. Caitlyn never asked for that role. The league bestowed it upon her. They witnessed the ratings climb and decided, yep, she's our prized asset. And now, when problems arise, she is also the fall guy. That is the truly messed up part. Stephanie White is essentially saying, stop hiding behind Caitlin Clark. If you have issues with the CBA, deal with those directly. If you are upset with leadership, say that. But do not transform every single debate into the Caitlin Clark conversation. The sad part, this isn't likely to end soon, because Caitlyn equals money, and money has the final say. But here is the twist. The more they exploit her name, the more fans begin to turn against the league. Because the public is catching on now. They can recognize when the league is using her image to mask its own failures. Remember early in the season, when officials allowed her to get tossed around on the floor and the league was silent. Then once the backlash became deafening, they suddenly began to issue statements about player safety. Yeah, that's what White is talking about. They only take action when it becomes a PR problem, not when it's the right course of action. And this issue goes beyond officiating. It's about respect. It's about communication. It's about genuinely listening to the people who make the league function. White has been around the WNBA long enough to distinguish between true leadership and PR spin. And Cathy Engelbert, she is all PR spin. That is why players like Collier and coaches like White are finally pushing back. They have seen this scenario play out before, and it doesn't have a good ending. The WNBA is at a crossroads. They possess momentum, attention, and stars who can genuinely shift the culture, but they are also losing patience. And Stephanie White just made that abundantly clear. The WNBA has created this paradoxical culture, where everyone wants to support women's basketball, but not if it requires admitting one player. Caitlin Clark is the main force behind most of the growth. They will gladly use her in promotional material, plaster her face on every advertisement, and mention her every 5 seconds during a broadcast. But the second she receives too much credit, they suddenly get nervous. Oh no, she is getting too popular. She's overshadowing others. I'm sorry, but that is what happens when someone revolutionizes the sport. Michael Jordan did it, LeBron did it, Serena did it. Now Caitlyn is doing it. And just like every other revolution in sports, there is envy, apprehension, and internal politics behind the scenes. That is what Stephanie White sees, and she is astute enough to say it without burning down bridges. But the theory is, the WNBA is ill-equipped to handle its own success. They finally have the attention they have begged for. Millions of new fans, packed arenas, genuine excitement, and they are squandering it with internal drama and tone-deaf leadership. And the funniest part, Kathy Engelbert is now pretending as if she's the one who grew the league. Yeah, right. The league exploded because Caitlin Clark made people care. People started watching because of her games, not because the commissioner gave another press conference about sustainability. And every time someone points that out, Kathy suddenly adopts a victim mentality. Oh, I'm disheartened. Lady, you are not a middle school principal. You are running a professional league. That's the kind of fake leadership Stephanie White is talking about. It is not leadership when you hide behind press releases and scheduled meetings. Leadership is standing up for your players when they are being crushed online or disrespected on the court. White has done that, Engelbert has not.